Fans of the Horus Heresy, Warhammer 40,000, science fiction and modern wargaming, 28mm scale and keeping the alien outside your perimeter, thank you very much for joining me for a review of The Defensive Base by Lasercut Architect. So this follows on from the review where I unpacked this large MDF terrain kit, and as you can see I've assembled it, and what I'm going to do in this review is take you through, well, a load of things really. What I think of the kit, what the kit was like to build and what the quality of the parts was like. I'm going to show you examples of all the different parts and buildings that you get in a set. Then we're going to do some size tests to see how functional and utilitarian this is with 28mm science fiction wargame miniatures. And finally, I'm going to go to a different camera angle to give you a few ideas of just how you might lay this different modular set out, because it can be done in several ways and it's quite clever how it works. So that's what we're going to do. First thing, this set cost me £60. It's comprised of 4 separate kits: the Gatehouse, the defensive bunker, the straight wall set, which is 3 straight walls and then these 2 curved ones, and then finally the corner wall set, which is 4 of those and 1 of those. The Gatehouse also includes one of these straight wall sections. So it's an MDF kit and you have to self-assemble it. I don't know if you've built any MDF terrain before, but it can take a while, and depending on the complexity of the model, there can be a lot of parts. Now, I'd say this is a reasonably complex MDF kit because it's been put together in such a way that it hides a lot of the things that make it look like MDF terrain. So it's a bit more of a time-consuming build than some of this stuff is. However, flip side to that is all the parts come pre-cut out, so you don't have to actually cut the parts out of a carrier sheet, which is how I've seen some MDF terrain presented. And believe me, when you're making a big kit, that takes a lot of time. One thing straight up which I liked about the design of this was the fact that everything was pre-cut and I got it out of the box and I could start building it. Very straightforward. In terms of the quality of the part and the kits, I think it was uniformly very good. Every part was present and none of the parts were damaged either. And there were a lot of parts in this. If we just take an example of this wall, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There's 17 components that make that one wall up. So there are quite a lot of parts that go into it. I was pleased at the quality and also the fact that everything was there and it had been packed well. That was really good. And I guess from the point of view of most people will buy this mail order, it packs into thin little boxes that are probably about 12 to 15 millimeters deep, so they will go through normal letterboxes very easily. Kit quality was good. Instructions, I'll show you the instructions for the 4 kits. So they're a single A5 sheet, there's no parts numbering, and you have an exploded diagram. So that's a Gatehouse, the defensive bunker, the defensive walls, and the defensive wall corners. I think in terms of instructions, I said there's no parts numbering. For me, it didn't matter at all on these 2. I don't think that really needed any numbering. I mean, to be honest, even this was pretty straightforward. The Gatehouse was a bit more complex, so I did have to lay the parts out and just work out what everything was first before I actually assembled it. But it was actually okay in the end, and the instructions did usefully call out the fact that you need to glue these footings in after you put the gate in. One thing I did find with this is the Gatehouse is by far the trickiest thing to build, and of course, like a bit of a muppet, I went and built it first. So I kind of like did the hardest thing first, and then following on with doing the others were pretty easy by comparison. I mean, certainly this bunker was an absolute doddle to build. The Gatehouse takes a bit more time, however, I think the instructions are fine, and as long as you lay parts out and match them up to the instructions, it does work fine. One thing I will say is you can see these 2 guide rails that are shown stacked vertically. These serve as a guide rail for the 2 doors, and we'll see this when we look at the Gatehouse. It shows them vertically stacked. Now that's quite hard to stick them in position that way. What I did is I just rotated them through 90 degrees and stuck them on the underside of the roof flat. And that actually worked really well. It was much easier to stick them and it fulfills exactly the same functional purpose. So that'll be one tip to you. You know, easier to do, just rotate them 90 degrees, put them the wide side stuck on. Overall, the instructions were fine actually, and I've certainly dealt with a lot worse. In terms of assembly, I assembled the vast majority of this kit with some thick super glue. For this sort of work, I use super glue I get from Bond kits. So that very handily comes with an accelerator as well, so a can of aerosol accelerator. I found the accelerator useful for getting this to stick quickly at times. I used a bit of PVA. I used PVA to stick the walls together, large body sections of a wall. Gave me plenty of time once I'd stuck them to then align the roof on properly and the walkway that runs through it. So I think in terms of construction tips, that's really the only thing I have to say. These walls were a little bit fiddlier to put together because you only get one set of instructions in effect, and it shows you how to do one and then it says reverse it for the other side. It might have been useful to have a diagram for both sides, but well, I worked it out, but I'm just thinking some people might find that harder to do. So overall, construction wise, very good. For the size of the kit, it was dead easy to build. Overall, I was very satisfied with assembling this kit. It was very good. Right, now what we're going to do is we're going to bring each piece on in turn, an example of each piece, and I'm just going to show you its features up close. And we'll start with this one, which is the gatehouse. The first thing you notice is you have a separate roof. Within the roof you have a raised platform that your models can stand on. You get a nice set of ladders modelled on to represent access, and that's always useful. You can see here we've got this cutout here, and that's been designed to link up with all the other sections, and that's what makes this particularly attractive, is how it all links together. But I'll come to that later. You could stick this on, I suppose. I decided to leave it off, and that's for ease of putting models in and out during the game. You know, I think if I'm feeling particularly adventurous or frivolous, I might put some tiny little magnets on the top of this, recess them into the top, and then I can clip it on. I think that will actually work quite well. In terms of the robustness of this kit, I think here is my only call out is regards to these vertical uprights that support the roof. I mean, they're pretty strong, and the fact that you've got 9 holding the roof up here is a good number, but it is still a more fragile part of the model, and if you're storing this and throwing it in a terrain bin, you know, just be mindful of those, not to damage them. Nice detailing. So we've got the surface, almost like concrete block details. We've got the griddle pattern and attachment points on the walkways. This walkway, you've got this mesh design. On the actual gates, you've got some air vents. You've got these fine grills. These are beautifully done. Very fine detailing on those, particularly for an MDF. And I don't know quite how they managed to do these without setting the whole thing on fire, because this is laser cut, but they've done it. So, you know, it's there. Get these upright buttresses, which have got these large screw heads on. Get the grills on the base of the buttress, as if it's maybe a rainwater run out or something. On the inside, the doors are undetailed. It's only on the outside. And the upper part of the balcony doesn't have any brick texturing on it. One thing I did think with this is you've got these interlocking edges here, which is how it goes together, but then you've got the brick done in a different sort of size. Did think to myself once I built it, would it have looked better if the detail had been aligned to these? I don't know, I'm not sure. I think it matters too much. Party piece, or one of the party pieces on this gatehouse, is that these doors slide open. So you can go for really cool, fluffy looking things with doors open, and they kind of recess into here, and you just give them a little push and they slide through, and they can go all the way, as you can see. They're not designed to be taken out once the model's assembled, well, you can't, but I found they work really well. And if we have a quick look at the top, we've got all these nice grills. You want to be quite careful when you're putting these on, because these are individual pieces. Don't want to damage them. These things drop out. I could just stick them in, but I think they've been designed that you could mount a radar dish or a gun turret of some sort onto them and then have it rotate, which I think is rather neat. I've already played a game with this and I found it's very utilitarian, works well, access is great. Thumbs up on that front. So that's everything I'd like to say about the gatehouse. Now we're going to move on to the defensive bunker. Okay, so this is a defensive bunker, and this is designed, again, the roof comes off. It's exactly the same design as a gatehouse. It's designed to clip onto walls, and then you've got a raised platform to be a guard position. All the same sort of detailing as we had on the gatehouse itself, so it fits in very nicely. Same sort of utilitarian features, useful for games. Got your ladder, you've got a good sized deck area with detail, and then it can connect on to other wall sections. Same thing again with the roof. I've not stuck it on, got the same sort of upright supports. And again, this section here is separate, so you can mount a turret in there or a radar dish or something else. Really quick kit to build. I built that in under an hour. That was a really quick one to do. I can also see how the defensive bunker is a great expansion thing to buy once you've got the set, because you can buy a single bunker and just drop it in and increase the perimeter size and the defensive raised firing positions. So I really like that, and for me that's something I think I'll probably buy some more of as well to expand this set. I do like it. Now let's take a look at a straight section of wall. I'll talk about some general features with a wall on this example, and then I'll just point out the differences on the others. So the main construction of this is a front upright and a floor piece. Floors have got this grilling design. They've got these attachment plates. They fit so the detailing is continuous with the other sections, and you've got those screw heads. You've got some nice detailing running along the top. You've got this like warning hazard star design. You've got the sort of screw plates, and then you've got the grills. In terms of assembly, I built this section first. I used a right angle to make sure that this is true. Then I added these buttresses on, and then the details. The buttresses, now this is perhaps the only little, it really is a little niggle. These triangular sections are cut with a slight angle on them. I think it's how the effect of a laser. So as you can see there, the buttress front isn't quite true. It is on some and it isn't on others, but that really is a minor niggle, and I'm splitting hairs to point that out. Right, let's look at the corner piece. Exactly the same design, as you can see. This time though, the attachment is cut at 45 degrees, and we'll see how that fits together when we do the actual layout design. Once again, we've got continuation of the detail between the different pieces. So when it's all laid out, whichever two pieces go together, it does look really good. And then finally, we'll look at one of the curved sections. Of the walls, this is by far the most complex section. And you can see how you've got two, I don't know, what are they? 30-degree angles, perhaps. Other than that, it's exactly the same drill. When you're building these are supposed to go a certain way around, these asymmetric grill details, so you do need to just check for that. And also the fit on the base of the grills on the inside corner is quite tight. I had to cut one down a little bit, just shave a bit off with the sandpaper, but it was a very minor modification and you can't tell at all, so that's fine. And then this piece that runs along the top is a single continuous piece, so you need to be careful handling these because they're thin pieces of MDF before you glue it on, but it does serve the purpose of allowing you to line everything up really well in the final piece. So yeah, very good. So that's a look around the different pieces. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this around and we're going to lay out a section, and then I'm going to show you size comparisons with a variety of models. Okay, so I've set out the gatehouse, two wall sections, two straight wall sections, and the defensive bunker. I'm now going to put some miniatures against this so you can see how they look. Let's start with a 28mm heroic sci-fi model. This is a female Arcadian Guard by Victoria Miniatures, and there you go. So nicely sized. That slit is at head height. I'll just show you on a piece closer up. Been a bit silly sticking the barrel through, but yeah, it's a good size. So the next model is what you might call closer to true 28mm or borderline heroic, and this is a Algarin AI trooper equipped with a micro X launcher. And this guy we're going to put up in the defensive bunker. There you go. So you can see he has got a nice height, just what you want. There's a bit of headroom there, perfect. Moving to a scale which I think is sold as 32mm. This is a Martian Banshee line breaker by Prodos Games. Now this guy's going to be on the wrong side of the barricade for his usual intended role, but you know, hey ho. That's just the right sort of height to go behind the defensive wall. You can see his pistol barrel poking out there. Let's move on to probably one of the most used, or what is going to be one of the most used miniatures on this type of terrain, which is one of Games Workshop's Space Marines. And here we've got a rather handsome example of an Astartes in the form of one of my Iron Hands Mark III Marines by Forge World. This is Sniper Dude. This is a bigger figure, and we'll put it in here. So that fits nicely in that raised guard position. As I've mentioned, Space Marines, I suppose we should have a look at one of the ghillie men. Here we've got a Primaris Space Marine armed with a phased plasma rifle. Yep, stands nicely behind the barricades. Let's go for a double bubble test on this guy and put him up in the guard tower. And even in the guard tower, there's a good 2 or 3 millimeters clearance on the roof, so that works really well. Okay, let's continue with the size escalation. Now I've got a Terminator Marine, so this is the Primus Medicae in Cataphractii armour. Again, you know, it works very nicely behind the barricade. And as it's a Terminator, let's just try stand him up in the turret. And what we can see there at the corner of the camera shot is that nicely fits in there. And it looks to me as if these forward sections of the guard tower have been specifically designed to accommodate a 40mm base. You wouldn't, for example, be able to get a Custodian Terminator in there unless you swap the base sizes, which is naughty. Even if you did, I think they're too tall. So yeah, no Custodian Terminators in there. Talking of the Custodians, here we have a Sagittarium Guard from Horus Heresy. Perfect behind the barricade. Will he be able to go in the Gatehouse is the next question. Bearing in mind that his Pickelhaube is going to be precipitously close to the roof, and that is just a little bit too tall. That was actually just resting on his Pickelhaube. So I'm going to put him down there. Normal Custodians with their big plumes wouldn't fit in the Gatehouse, but I guess why would they be in a guard position in the Gatehouse anyway? And let's do a big Space Marine or a big Terminator. So this is an Iron Hands Iron Father miniature, who I use as Ortec Moore. And it's getting quite busy now. Clearly he's not going to fit in the guard tower on account of his servo arm, and I think that's true of any Tech Marine model. It's going to be too tall. However, on the front defensive line, fits very nicely, so that's good. Do you think we should do any more miniature comparisons? Well, let's do one more figure before we move up to monstrous creatures. If you have a Space Lord army commanded by, for example, here we have Lord Buckethead. Let's just see how he stands next to the terrain. He's very tall, so his bucket head is exposed to fire from enemy troops, but for purposes of representative cover, it's fine. Clearly, he's not going to fit in the guard tower without some special architectural accommodations. So that's the infantry done. I want to move on and look at walkers. So I've got 3 walkers to look at, which I think are representative of the general sort of sizes that certainly in 40K you use, and you can extrapolate these and think accordingly. Firstly, we have a Castellax equipped with a Darkfire cannon. So these are still infantry, they're not vehicles. And we're going to have a little bit of a reorganisation. Yep, that's fine. He would be able to claim a cover benefit from the barricade. Now let's move on to a true vehicle, shall I say. And here we've got the sort of Contemptor Dreadnought that you might find in a defensive line position with a pair of Kerry's Assault Cannon. And let's see what he looks like. So that's pretty tall. Now, this is where I need to think about this a bit. In the world of 7th edition, that would be able to claim cover at the 25% threshold. In 8th edition, I think he still does claim cover. It's a little bit ambiguous. The FAQ to the 8th edition rules has done a wonderful job of creating a slightly confusing definition of when you're in cover, when you're not. It says if it's on the cover, so I guess all you can really say is if a Dreadnought has its base fully up against the edge of this on the walkway, it could be in cover. Certainly for 7th edition, he would get cover. 8th edition, he's probably not quite half covered. So once you get to Contemptor size, they're too big for these barricades to gain a benefit. And to really emphasise, here we've got the Duradio Fire Support Dreadnought, and I'm just going to move Ortec more, so he shouldn't really be on the front line. And we'll pop Castellax there, and the Duradio there. The Duradio is way too big in the world of 8th to claim cover off that barricade as a vehicle and a walker. However, in 7th edition games, such as Horus Heresy, he would still qualify for the 25% cover rule, so he would get probably a 4+ cover save, depending on what you want to count this as. There's your size comparisons on walkers. Now I'm going to do one more size comparison. I'm really flogging this for everything it's worth, but I'm trying to do all the size comparisons that I think are relevant. And the final vehicle class is, well, something the size of a Rhino, so an APC. Now, the Rhino would nicely fit through the Gatehouse, so you may want to have it moving in and out of a compound. In terms of Horus Heresy and 7th edition, it would certainly be able to claim cover from a barricade. In 8th edition, well, the wording is that ambiguous. Maybe, maybe not. Certainly for thinking about 7th edition gaming, if you had more range equipped Rhino variants, so for example, a Predator, which you might want to hold down behind a barricade, you know, there might be some value in doing that. So that's all the size comparisons I wanted to do for this barricade. So what I'm going to do now is going to take all these miniatures away, and then we're going to move to some top-down shots, and I'm going to do a few different layouts of how you can set the whole setup. So here is the first layout, and I'll call this the classic defensive perimeter. Basically this is just simply the gatehouse on one side, the defensive bunker on the other, and a ring of walls around it. So it's quite a small thing, I don't know, but it will make a fun little thing to defend in a small game. The defensive bunker can go on any straight wall section, so you could go here, it could go here, or anywhere along there. And likewise, the gatehouse is the equivalent, I think, of probably 2 straight wall sections. So that's the first setup. This next setup is very simply a straight defensive line, and I've only used a portion of all the parts in the kit to do this, and basically it just strings the whole thing together in a long line. So this uses the whole kit apart from, in terms of straights, apart from 2 straights, and I've not put any corners into it either, but you could probably fit those in somehow. The corners aren't quite so useful for this setup, but you still can create something that's probably about 4 feet long, maybe, so good length. There's a second idea for how you could configure this. A third idea is this open ring defensive wall, and this would be useful as a defensive position, perhaps in front of a larger fortification, or maybe to be built around a significant objective. And one thing I did in a game with my son a few nights ago was to take the guardhouse and put it in the center of this ring and use that as a defensive position, and that worked really well. It'd be quite good to have a low gate to put in between 2 of these wall sections. I might see if we can find something like that. So there's a third idea of how to set this out. And for a fourth idea, here's just something that I cooked up now, which is basically using the idea of these curved sections to step the gatehouse back between 2 defensive wall positions to create, you might say, a bit of a killing zone in front of the guardhouse itself. Just another little idea I had. And I guess, as is always the case with modular terrain like this, you can set it up in so many different ways. It does have a tremendous amount of potential for creating different layouts in your games. I'm really pleased with this. I think it's a great addition. I've already used it in a game and it was absolutely ace. And with this set, there's actually enough to have a defensive wall like this and this guard bunker with a protective perimeter of walls around it, where the mission was to sally forth from the main defense line and go rescue some people in the bunker, and that worked really well. So I think I'll wrap it up from this nice symmetrical view here. So closing thoughts, well, as I said, I thought the kit was really good, pretty straightforward to build, good instructions, and good quality as well. The final thing to comment on is value. I guess the obvious thing to compare this to is Games Workshop's Aegis Defence Line kit. Worked it out, and the Aegis Defence Line retail is £22.50, I think. If you buy it from an independent, it's probably about 18 quid. So you're going to get around 3 of those for one of these sets. In terms of the amount of wall you get, well, with the Aegis Defence Line, you get less wall. However, the wall is split into smaller sections, so it can be laid out in a more versatile way. However, it doesn't have a nice walkway details that this one does. Those are just sort of like upright barricades. The Aegis Defence Line comes with the quad gun model, which for 40k gaming is clearly useful. However, what it doesn't have anything remotely like is either the gatehouse or the guard bunker. I think if you look at it from that point of view, then for the same sort of money, you do get a bit more length of wall, and you get 2 great buildings that integrate to become part of that wall. And I think probably all said and done, that makes this, for me anyway, that makes this quite a bit better value proposition. And it is certainly a more versatile piece of terrain, I think, overall, and you can have a lot more fun in terms of games, things that you can do with these and the gatehouse. That's just some thoughts on the value. To me, it seems good value for £60 British. So I hope you've enjoyed that review. There was a lot to look at there. It's a big kit and it has, as we see, a lot of different applications. With it being modular, you can use it in so many different ways. Let me know what you think of it. Can you think of any other clever ways you could set this out? Do you know of any alternatives in the market that you think do this job as well as better, worse, whatever it may be? What do you think of Games Workshop's Aegis Defence Line kit by comparison? All these thoughts, I'll be very interested to hear. But apart from that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.